I'm starting the broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the AIA Florida Board Orientation. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And at this time, I will turn it over to our president, starting on January 1st, 2014, Mr. Nathan Butler. Nathan?
All right. Thank you, Becky. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for making time to join in on this this webcast today so that we can get you oriented and get things focused heading into the new year. I know everybody's busy with getting holiday deadlines worked out and trying to get everything wrapped up before the holiday week starts. So we'll keep this focused and keep it moving along in a timely fashion. And as Becky mentioned, I'm pleased to be coming on board for 2014 as the AIA Florida president, and really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. We wanted to, first of all, welcome you all to board service with AIA Florida. We're very excited to have everybody here and joining the board, joining the leadership team at the state level and representing each of your individual components on the Florida board. And today we wanted to review some of our essential elements to board service. And we wanted to start with the vision statement that you see on your screen, in that we are a united association of architects who lead the shaping of Florida's future. And we wanted to, with respect to that vision, just go over some of the key things of our board service and then talk a little bit about the committee structure for next year as well, so that all of you will have an opportunity to familiarize yourself with that and make a initial selection of which committees you are interested in participating on for the coming year. So we'll start out the year with a greater level of focus. After this webinar, you will receive an email that's going to have a survey link, which will ask you to rank your committee preference for 2014. And those committees will be formed based on the results of the survey, and all of the announcements in terms of the committee assignments will be made at the January board meeting. That's on January the 15th. So that survey link is going to be very important, so keep an eye out for that in your emails and respond to it so that we'll know going in where your interests lie, and we can align you with the committee where you're going to be most engaged and we can stay focused. Our first board meeting is on Wednesday, January the 15th, and that's going to be at the Sheraton Four Points in Tallahassee, and breakfast and lunch are going to be provided at that meeting. And as many of you may know, the day before that, the 14th, is our legislative day, so we will be convening to visit our representatives and our senators on the Hill and going over our advocacy initiatives for the year. So it's very important, I think, that everybody participate in that, and we have a strong showing for that session. The board notices are sent electronically, and those are sent out about 30 days prior to the meeting. So all of you should have already received the notice of the meeting with hotel information and meeting times and so forth. You are responsible for making your own hotel reservations directly with the meeting venue, so be sure you go ahead and do that. I think the window for the negotiated rate is closing on us here, so be sure you do that if you have not already. The board materials are distributed by email 10 days prior to the meeting. That's the meeting packets, the agendas, and the content for the meeting. We don't distribute hard copies of those any longer. We typically email those out in PDF format for all of you to follow on your devices during the meeting, and we also will be projecting that on a screen at the board meeting as well. Additional board materials are distributed no less than 24 hours prior to the meeting. If anything new comes up right before the meeting, we can distribute it quickly through that format. Before we proceed, I wanted to also review how the meetings are procedurally run really quickly. Our board meetings are run using Robert's Rules of Order, and our parliamentarian in that regard is our past president, which is Dan Kirby, and it's very helpful when going through our proceedings.
Nathan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
We've just kind of lost our audio there for a minute. I don't know if you're going to have to call back in or what. Is that you, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Okay.
We lost your audio there for a minute.
Okay. All right. Well, I am still here. Well, yes, the Robert's Rules of Order is where I was just at, and our past president, Dan Kirby, will serve as the parliamentarian. And it's very helpful for members who have a motion to make at a particular meeting to draft that motion in advance, so it's crafted and it's been well thought out before it's put to the floor and ready for discussion. And everyone must be recognized before speaking, and Dan will be facilitating that process as we go forward. Before we proceed, we also wanted to just be sure at any time during this webinar, if you have a question, please, there's a question pane on your screen, so you can type your question in there, and we will take a look at that and discuss that and address it for everyone in the group's benefit. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our Executive Vice President, Vicki Long, and we'll proceed through the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm a little concerned about the fact that I'm going to be going over the leadership manual and bylaws and policies just after we finish with lunch. But we'll try to keep this moving along at a nice clip. If you have any questions, again, just go ahead and type them in or just jot notes to yourself. I'll be happy to address them at the end of the review. Again, I'm only going to hit the highlights. I would really strongly encourage you to go through with a highlighter pen and kind of look at the bylaws, certainly the rules that support the bylaws, and any kind of procedural type of information that you might need later on. As was discussed last week when we were at a legislative briefing across the street, the clerk of the House was saying, it's one thing to understand the rules and how to get, something accomplished, such as 2 + 2 = 4. But if you understand the policies, the bylaws, the processes that you have at your disposal, you can find infinite numbers of ways to get to number 4. So just kind of as an addition to your knowledge base and that you can use in future endeavors on other boards that you are participating with, I hope that you'll find this helpful. So you all have your leadership manual electronically. I'm just going to flip through again and just go through the highlights.
You should just hang on one second.
Sure.
Is that echo gotten better for anybody? Or I guess if you could type in, I know we've gotten a couple of people type in that they have an echo. Okay. Okay.
All right. Tell me if I need to pick up the phone.
Okay. Nathan, I have muted you, so if you need to speak, please raise your hand or shoot me a chat. I think that's where the echo problem is coming from. So I think, all right, okay. I think we're okay now. Thank you, everybody, for responding.
Okay. Again, just holler if there does occur an echo again. In Section 1 of your manual, you will find our dashboard of our strategic plan. What I would point out to you is that everything has been color-coded, so when you run across things that, for example, you might find things in the budget presentations from time to time that will have these little colored dots on the side of it, you'll know that's how it references back to our strategic plan. The strategic plan has just been updated. We do this every year, and then we concentrate on 2- and 3-year increments as well. If we just go into the bylaws themselves, again, this is our roadmap. This is what makes us, keeps our organization out of trouble. Section 2 of Article 1 is our purpose. It is rather all-encompassing statement, and it ensures that all of the activities that we are engaged with fall within the scope of what our organizers have originally intended. Both as far as the association is concerned and as far as the laws of Florida are concerned. On your leadership manual, page 6, you will find information on membership. Obviously, when people join the AIA, they must join all 3 levels. You cannot just join one or the other. We do have a 3-tiered membership base. We also have architect members, emeritus members, associate members, students, honorary AIA Florida, etc. On page 7 of your manual, you will find some information about the status of membership. I would just highlight that termination of membership is very specific. You cannot terminate a member for anything other than either an ethics violation or for not paying their dues. If you went around self-selecting who may or may not be a member of your association, you could very quickly find yourself in trouble with anti-competitive activities. People that are not allowed membership based on the fact that you don't like them, or they're doing better business than you are, and you exclude them from the organization, they have a great claim against you for antitrust because they are now losing the benefit of membership. Our meetings on page 8, just very briefly, we are required by our bylaws to have an annual meeting. I think Nathan already mentioned to you that on July 17th, or he will follow up with you, July 17th we will be having our annual meeting at the Doral Hotel in Miami. It looks to be a great event, so make sure you have that in your calendars. And importantly with that meeting, item D, subparagraph 3, each component's delegate votes will be equally divided among its accredited delegates. Please remember at the component level that you need to select your delegates very carefully. For those people that are going to attend the meeting, stay throughout the meeting and get there and get accredited early in the morning. If they do not get accredited in the morning, we are supposed to ask for a motion of the members in attendance to allow that person to be accredited late. It's really not something that you want to do. If we can avoid that at all possible, that would be great. We also want to make sure they're going to stay for the duration so that, for example, if there was a tie vote on an issue, or if we were not able to get to a clear decision on folks that were being elected to office, they might need to be in attendance for any kind of runoff elections that may need to be followed up with. On page 10 of the manual, you will find that you do have the ability as components and as members to ask for special meetings. There are some rules for those special meetings. 25% of the total number of architect members, emeritus members, associate members could petition the board for a special meeting, or not less than half of the components, provided that each component gets concurring vote of not less than 2/3 of their membership. So obviously a very compelling reason would be the basis for somebody asking for a special meeting of the board. In almost 10 years, I've never seen that happen, but you do have that authority delegated to you as both members and component leadership. On page 11, you will find some information on the voting that takes place at the annual meeting and at special meetings. Again, those components provide the delegates that are going to vote on the business of the association, but the components do not have to vote in block. They have the ability to, those folks that are given those, are delegated the responsibility of holding the vote for the component, can vote any which way they want to. They are not required to come to any kind of consensus, although that has been the practice for some of our components on a regular basis. Additionally, we do not allow for proxy voting, so folks need to attend. Once they have been selected as a delegate, they need to go on ahead and show up and get their accreditation, and that way you make sure your voice is being heard. In section 6, you'll find that we do not take any kind of votes by letter ballot. Again, it's an in-person balloting situation. Again, with the meetings, whether or not it's the executive committee or the bylaw, or excuse me, the board, we do occasionally go into executive session, and generally that's going to be for a very specific reason. That was a funny sentence. Generally for specific reasons. They are for specific reasons, and we ask that in executive session that no notes are taken. There's no outside discussion about the content of that executive session. And in the minutes, you will find that there will just be general subject matter notations as to what the subject matter was. Generally, that's going to be very sensitive information, might be a legal question that's come around, or something that would be sensitive. So again, we do ask everybody respects very carefully the aspects of an executive session. The board of directors, make yourself familiar with that, but basically the board consists of the officers, which are your executive committee members, 2 or more state directors from each of the components, the regional directors of the Florida Caribbean region, the immediate past president, who also, as Nathan says, acts as our parliamentarian, an associate member at large is our associate director at large, and a public member. We also have ex officio members that not everyone is aware of. We invite the deans or department chairpersons of each of our NAV-accredited schools of architecture in Florida to participate, as well as any other ex officio members that the board might deem appropriate to approve. Again, the state directors are supposed to be elected at the component level for 2-year terms, and those should be staggered terms. And we, in our bylaws, specify that those people need to be elected prior to September 30th of each year. I don't know if that puts us in conflict with any of the components out there, if they are structured that they can have their elections up into November and December, but it gets problematic for both AIA Florida and AIA National to not have that information prior to September 30th for purposes of membership directories and, you know, just basically knowing who's who on behalf of the components. The authority of the board is rather broad-ranging. The board manages, directs, controls, and conducts and administers the property affairs and business of the association in between the annual meetings. They also are required to issue bulletins and publications. They establish and adopt the rules and regulations. And they're expected to convey the interests and the commentary from and to the components. We do have at least 4 regular meetings every year of the Board of Directors, and we do, again, try to get those meeting notices out well in advance with any kind of supporting material well in advance. I think we've already talked about the special meetings to the extent we need to. On page 15 of your manual, you will find that, again, some of the checks and balances that have been embedded in our bylaws are that the suspension of an officer's authority for one thing, and on the other hand, we have removal of state directors. State directors who miss 2 consecutive meetings are at risk of being automatically removed as a state director unless they have obtained written permission or an excuse from the association and president in advance of the meeting. Any state director can be removed for or without cause by affirmative votes of the folks that elected them to office. On the other hand, the board has the authority to suspend officers' authority to act. Now, I've never had this come up, but my assumption would be if the board wanted to suspend an officer's ability to do something, it would probably be based on a perceived conflict of interest that the board feels that that officer might have. In a perfect world, we would expect that officer to have already self-declared a conflict of interest and taken themselves out of the picture insofar as making decisions, but the board absolutely does have that kind of authority. As far as the officers of the association are concerned, I would ask that you acquaint yourself with the elections process, but would point out to you that the president is not elected as president. They are elected as the first vice president and then automatically ascend to the president's position after a year of serving as president-elect. Secretary-treasurer has a 2-year term and is eligible for re-election, and each of our offices begin with a calendar year. Those of you who are on the board for the first time, congratulations. Only architect members who have been on the board for at least 1 year may serve or be eligible for nomination as first vice president or president-elect. Not necessarily something that would be recommended because you probably want to get your feet a little bit more wet than 1 year before running for a vice president-elect position, but there you have it. Again, some of the terms and conditions for those folks that are going to run for higher office while serving as an officer already, they do have resignation requirements for the unexpired term of their year if they do get nominated. The duties of the officers are pretty self-explanatory, so I think I'm just going to flip through to the page 19 of your manual, which speaks to the removal of officers. Again, if this were to happen, I think we would be in a pretty deep bucket of trouble. Any or all of the elected officers can be removed for or without cause at any duly constituted meeting of the association by 2/3 majority vote of the delegates that are entitled to vote. That would be an extreme case, and I just can't imagine in my wildest dreams where that would become a requirement unless we were going to redesign the entire association, and that was a parliamentary procedure to allow for next steps. But again, it would just be a very unusual set of circumstances for the board to have to ask for something like that. Some of the powers that are relegated to the executive committee are again, they just run the association in between those board meetings, except for the fact that there are things that are excluded from the executive committee's purview, and those are to adopt the general budget, make changes to the policies, rules of the board or the bylaws, making an award of honor, purchasing, selling, or real property. I can say it when you guys aren't listening. Form an affiliation or fixed assessments or annual dues. Any kind of annual dues changes are done only with the board's approval. The decisions that are made by the executive committee during those other meetings throughout the year that take place between board meetings are recorded in the minutes and are provided to the board at the meeting immediately following for ratification. You will find those are included in your board packets every time we sit. The administrative and executive department, that refers basically to your staff and myself up here in Tallahassee. Certainly feel free to review all of that information. Moving on to Article 8, committees and task forces. These are the entities that allow the work to continue on a yearly basis as completed by our volunteer members, board members. We have two permanent standing committees. They are the nominating committee and the finance committee. Other standing committees are appointed by the president and approved by the board. We will, as stated earlier, be asking for volunteers to sign up for the different committees that are out there, and Nathan will be going over what those committees are. I will say that as a personal aside, I think that the Communications Committee has got a really exciting year ahead of it with all of the different communications devices and websites and things like that are being looked at. The Legislative Committee is pretty highly focused just in certain times of the year. The Membership Committee is always challenged to find new and interesting ways of trying to recruit those folks who have heretofore not decided to join our association or for whatever reason have not renewed, and it's just always an interesting challenge to figure out how can we get back to those people and get them back into the fold, as it were. Of those standing committees, again, the nominating committee, very self-explanatory as far as the process that they go through in putting together a slate of candidates. Finance committee, a lot of care goes into this committee in the preparation of an annual budget that establishes and conforms and funds our strategic business plan, and it does all of its recommendations, which are eventually adopted by the board of directors. Going on to page 27, insofar as member dues, I already talked to you about the fact that one of the very few reasons that a person loses their membership is not paying their dues. Other than that, it does take some egregious behavior for them to be invited to leave. We also have within our bylaws an obligation to pay firm dues. It's a fairly nominal amount of money, but it is a requirement, and what that has done is allowed us to keep our individual member dues to the very low price of $150 per person. which for state associations, certainly amongst the big 8 states, our dues are minuscule as compared to a lot of those entities. Those firm dues have also given us the opportunity to raise money on behalf of the foundation and our Florida Political Action Committee through a simple dues checkoff device. Of course, we have the member emeritus category, which is defined by the AIA. Those of you will recall there was a bylaw amendment in 2012 which reestablished the emeritus parameters, which is 70 years of age and retired from active practice. Section 4 under member dues does talk about the remission of fees and dues. There are some limited circumstances under which our Secretary-Treasurer here in Florida could modify a person's dues based on hardship or whatever reason that comes before them, but that would only impact the Florida dues. If a person wanted to request a waiver or reduced dues or the ability to make payments, that's something that goes through AIA National with supporting documentation and approvals from both the local and state components. So if you know somebody out there that's struggling, and rather than losing them altogether, let's make sure and encourage them to see what kind of processes we can put in place to help them until they get back on their feet. I think we've talked enough about the annual budget, et cetera. If there are questions that you have, certainly feel free to either call me or raise your hand here shortly, and we'll be happy to go into more detail on that. Again, for your review would be the amendments to our bylaws or articles of incorporation. You'll find those on page 30. We do have, the board does have the authority to make changes to our bylaws if, for example, our bylaws were in conflict with the Institute bylaws or any applicable laws here in Florida. So that's the only time we would not be required to have, the full board come in and make those kind of adjustments. Behind the bylaws, you'll find the supplementing or the supplemental rules that basically give you additional information and guidance as far as the bylaws are concerned. I'm not going to go into all of that, but I would. I'm not going to go into all that. I think anything that needs to be addressed on a standalone basis will do so in the policies and guidelines. So if you would flip over to Section 3, which is page 55 of your manual, we do have reimbursement guidelines that are posted here. Most of that is going to refer only to the officers because those are the reimbursements that AIA Florida would be responsible for. State directors' expenses are paid by the components for which they are representing. I will tell you that should a state director be acting on behalf of AIA Florida, and AIA Florida is responsible for their reimbursements, we do require that expenses be, all requests be submitted within 30 days, and we ask that there be no exceptions to that rule. So please pay very close attention to that. If you're, again, out there on our behalf, make sure you get those. We want to reimburse you for those expenses, but due to, accounting practices, we need to make sure that they're done on a timely basis. Again, in your policies sections on page 59, it just reiterates the attendance policy for our state directors and the 2 consecutive meeting criteria. At your first meeting of the year, you will be asked to sign a code of conduct document. Basically, what that code of conduct covers is a request that you keep confidential, sensitive information that's discussed during the board meetings, and that sensitive information that could be detrimental to the association if it were discussed outside of the board or without authorization. We would ask that you keep it confidential. Conflicts of interest, we would ask at the beginning of each meeting as you review the agenda in advance of the meeting starting, if you could just let us know if you feel like you might have a conflict of interest. Sometimes the discussion will veer off and a person might feel that they would at some point have a conflict of interest, so they can always stop the meeting at any point. That does not mean they have to leave or they can't express an opinion, but that the opinion needs to be expressed with the understanding that this person is not coming from a necessarily unbiased point of view, that there might be, you know, a bit of a conflict. Violations, discipline could include removal from the board, or if it's a staff member, it could include up to termination of employment. We have adopted a whistleblower policy. We do try, to the extent possible, we would try. We've not really had an incident where we've had to investigate, but we would try with, to the extent possible, to protect the confidentiality of the person that is blowing the whistle. However, we can't guarantee it, but we have in our policy the statement that we will not tolerate harassment or retaliation of any sort against someone who has submitted anything under the whistleblower policy. There is a process that is notated on page 62 as applicable to the investigations and the processes that you have, and if you're not satisfied, you know, what additional steps can be taken to address the concerns. On page 63, you'll see a fairly substantial document, which is our investment policy. I will tell you it's a very conservative investment policy. We do not want to put hard-earned member dues into risky investments, and so it's a slow and steady go to race kind of a policy. On page 67, you'll find our advocacy principles and our regulatory policies. These are reviewed every year by our legislative committee, and what they do is give us, first of all, the broad principles under which we're operating, and then the specific policies that address issues that may or may not come up in any particular legislative or regulatory year. And what these do is give staff and our lobby team basically some parameters so that we don't have to call the executive committee every time a situation arises or pops up in an unexpected amendment, or you know, in a discussion occurs during a legislative committee hearing. So it just gives us some broad marching orders under which we can operate. On page 76, you will find our AIA Florida record retention policy. This is based on IRS guidelines. Basically, this keeps us from having records that are here in the office since 1912. Certainly those that are archivable or should be maintained, we have those in perpetuity. We do have a storage unit off-site where we have those things that you see there that we have permanent documents of, or copies of those documents. Again, this is based on IRS standard recommendations for not-for-profit entities. On page 77, you will find our antitrust statement. Did we decide that was violations of antitrust statements are taken very seriously by the federal government. Significant fines and penalties are accruable per incident. They can go as high as a $10 million cap and a $350,000 for the individual, $10 million cap for the organization. So it behooves us to be incredibly cautious, and whenever we start talking about anything that even smacks of pricing, business practices that might infringe on another company's ability to conduct business. Some examples would be, you know, let's all agree as AIA Florida members, we're not going to purchase materials from XYZ manufacturer because we don't like, you know, we don't like some of the people that they do business with, or any reason that you all might decide to collude and exclude somebody from having access to you as customers. So anything that kind of smacks to price fixing, even, colluding on what days you're going to all close so that everybody's in agreement that they're not going to lose any business because they're all going to close on Wednesday afternoon at noon. None of those things are appropriate kind of conversations to happen. If any of you are in a room, whether it's at your local component, whether it's at an AIA Florida board meeting, and I've fallen asleep or left the room and have not realized that we've ventured into that kind of an area, I would encourage you to stand up, make a lot of noise, get every bit of attention to yourself that you can, and ask that the record reflect that you are leaving the room, you are leaving the meeting because you feel that the meeting has devolved into the area of antitrust and that you're not going to participate in it, so that you protect yourself from any of those violation fines that we've just talked about. On page 79, you'll find that we do have an emergency plan. We have everything from disaster planning to, frankly, if there was to be the loss of a key leader, should I get hit by a Mack truck tomorrow on my way to work, you have a policy in place that guides the organization on what the steps are that need to be taken in an emergency type basis. In section 4, you'll find our gateway commitments, our resolutions, other actions of the board that have taken place since 2008. We're not going to require that you read a 4-inch binder of minutes from 2008. We have pulled out from those meeting minutes some of the big issues or the motions that were made or directives that were given, so that you've got that at a glance, again, rather than having to read 5 years worth of minutes, believe me. As much fun as I find that to be, I don't think you would necessarily enjoy that experience. In section 7, you have a listing of our executive committee members and our board members, so if you need to get a hold of anybody here in the near future, you have that available already. In section 6, we've given you a summary of the chart of accounts. Whenever we do financial statements, go over the profit and loss statements. Oftentimes there will be the question of, how does this relate back to the strategic plan, and how does it relate to the chart of accounts? So, for example, if you have a question on advertising revenues on line 605, what is that made up of? And it spells out exactly for you what that line item consists of, both as far as expenses and income are concerned. In section 7, we've inserted some general board responsibilities for you all to have at your fingertips. The top 10 responsibilities of the board, as established by and recognized by ASAE, which is the American Society of Association Executives, which is my AIA. Best practices are the board, you will be protected if you will limit yourself to these governing activities, and you will have a healthy organization if you will stick to these 10 responsibilities. Number 1 being determining the mission and purpose of the organization, selection of the chief executive officer, support and assessment of the CEO, EVP performance, ensuring the effective organizational planning, the strategic planning, which is purposeful planning, adequate resources, again, keeping your eye on the budget and the reports that we give you on a quarterly basis on where we are as far as projections and budget, etc. Managing those resources, again, same thing. Determining and monitoring our programs and services and making sure that they are still responsive to those strategic plan initiatives, or do we need to alter one or the other? Enhancing our public image. Again, you are the face of the organization at the local and state level, so clearly articulating and adhering to our mission, goals, and objectives would be a huge responsibility. ensuring our legal and ethical integrity and maintaining our accountability. You're ultimately responsible for those norms and standards. We have provided with you copies of our policies, our procedures, so that you know very well or have access to the information that you might need should any question arise in those areas. And then number 10, or maybe I put that number 1, is to recruit and orient new board members, assess their performance, try to develop that pipeline of folks for leadership consideration. You all, with your boots on the ground and your peer-to-peer contact, are the best ones to make those kind of evaluations and assessments. We have a handy-dandy guide on page 159. It's a little busy, but it really is everything that you need to know as a board member to guide your actions as a board member. If you can remember that your responsibility is governance, you're the visionaries, you want to do the strategic planning, you have that global 50,000-foot strategic thinking that we would like you to impart on the organization. Management, you know, you guys direct and I'll execute where I can with staff, and with staff working with the volunteers as we all pull together to advance the profession and the organization. I wanted to talk a little bit about the legal duties that you have as board members. You'll find it in the little blue square there in the middle of the front page. It says board legal duties. The duty of care, which requires you to use reasonable care and good judgment in making decisions on behalf of the organization. The duty of loyalty requires you to be faithful to the organization and avoiding those conflicts of interest. The duty of obedience, which means complying with the governing documents. If you do those 3 simple things, you're pretty well covered for any kind of dereliction of duty or any kind of legal encumbrances that are, or legal violations that would harm you should you deviate from these 3 overarching ideals. I serve on the local homeless coalition board here in Tallahassee, and on Monday night we had a lengthy meeting. We're looking at taking the homeless shelter, which has just been an ugly blight in the middle of our Tennessee Street here, and selling that property and working with some of the other coalition, homeless coalition people, you know, to strategize, build a better building, you know, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And there was an awful lot of commentary and questioning about, you know, the real estate deal and how this is going to get paid for. And finally, one of the gentlemen, who is actually an academician, finally piped up and he says, oh, there's so much suspicion and so much this. He says, I think you should just trust it's all going to work out. And that is not what I would call the duty of care. The duty of care means that you're going to ask those kinds of questions, that you're going to do your due diligence in making sure that you're using basically the prudent man level of decision-making process. You're going to use the same amount of care and concern as you would if you were writing the check out of your checkbook as you would in writing a check out of the organization's checkbook. Ask the hard questions. I'm not saying micromanage and do the math and, you know, get into the QuickBooks and that sort of thing, but I am saying you ask the questions, you do the duty of care, you use that prudent man judgment in making those decisions based on good advice and good research. Again, if you do that, you're going to be covered from, again, those things like the breach of trust issues with the incredible financial penalties that are associated with them. The tools that you use to accomplish those and ensure that you have used those, the duty of care, duty of loyalty, and obedience are your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, reviewing those financial statements as they're presented to you, reading those minutes to make sure that they're accurately reflecting your understanding of what transpired at a board meeting, understanding what's in this policy manual and studying our strategic plan and holding our feet to the fire, making sure that we're going to comply with it. I'm not going to go over the rules of order. That's kind of self-explanatory. The board risks, I think that you should know about. First of all, we do have a $2 million director and officer insurance policy, which would protect you, not against blatant negligence. It protects you in so long as you exercise your duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. Some things that you should be aware of, even at the component level, would be that public records requests under board risks. Someone asks you for a copy of your Form 990 or 990 EZ. We have those available at our front desk should anybody walk in off the street and ask to look at them. Should someone ask you for that, you need to get them in touch with us or call us or let us know immediately, because there are significant fines that can occur for noncompliance with providing that upon request. $10,000 would be the cap on that one, so we don't want to play around with that. If somebody asks for a record, we're kind of an open book here. The antitrust violations, again, we've gone over that, I think, pretty well. Apparent authority is one of those issues that arises on occasion when someone is speaking with apparently as the voice of the organization, and a person can have that based on, for example, I've had members that have asked for stationery so that they could draft, thinking they're going to take some of the burden off staff. They'll draft a letter or they'll draft a memorandum of understanding, or anything that's obliging the organization to another organization or entity. We can be held responsible for what that individual has done because we have given them the apparent authority to do so. So please be careful when making any kind of having discussions that you are not speaking on behalf of the organization unless you have literally been charged with that particular issue, which does not generally happen. Financial audits, for your information, we do an audit 1 year and then 2 years of reviews. Affordable thing to do every year. The review is slightly less meticulous than an audit is, but we do get standard reporting back from a local CPA, and to my knowledge, I can't recall the last time we had any management notes associated with those audits. In Section 8, you will find our 2012 annual report. You will find it is quite in-depth. You will be receiving a copy of the 2013 annual report shortly. And in Section 9, you will find laws and rules, etc., that govern the profession. One policy that I neglected to go over that popped into my head as we were going over those responsibilities of the board, and that was the communications policy. We do have a communications policy that is in effect. It is not intended to gag any of our board members or to reduce your comfort in speaking your mind freely on any particular issue. We do ask that if by chance a member of the press or someone, a legislator or whatever, asks you a question and you don't know what the position of the association is that you, A, check with us and espouse whatever that particular policy is, or if you're not comfortable with that, just say, speaking as an individual architect and not on behalf of any organization, this is my personal opinion. Again, we just want to make sure that any commentary that's coming out under the thought process that is coming from AIA Florida is indeed in alignment with those things that have been agreed upon by the body. Also in Section 8, I'm sorry, I had a note to self. Section 8, after the annual report, Section 9, you will find the reference material. Oh, I know what it was. It was the, where's that meetings at a glance? That's at page 136. That's what I wanted to draw your attention to, so that you can go ahead and notate your calendar for the important dates that we have coming up in, oh my gosh, 2014. So with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions and turn this back over to Nathan, who I believe was going to go through some of the committee goals and objectives for the next year.
All right, thank you, Vicki, and thanks for the organized breakdown of all the responsibilities and the procedures related to board positions. And I think for everyone who's just coming onto the board, you can see it's a very well organized group, and I think as you go through the year and through your term with the board, you'll find out just how fortunate we are to be supported by such a great and well organized staff that really helps to move this organization, this association, head and shoulders above our colleagues out there around the country. So thank you, and we wanted to go over the committee structure, and we have 4 primary committees, and all of us come to the board from different backgrounds and different perspectives. We bring different areas of interest to the board, so we want to give everyone an overview of our primary committees with a little bit of information about task forces as well, so that you'll have a good idea of where each of these committees is focused and where they're going, and you can make a selection when that survey email comes your way as to which committee you would like to work within during your board service in the coming year. The first one we wanted to go over is the advocacy group, and that is going to be headed up by our Vice President, Melody Bishop. Melody is from Jacksonville, and she has been on the board for some time now and has worked in different capacities in membership, most recently in the membership committee, and brings a well-rounded perspective on advocacy initiatives through her service on the board and in her area, in her community in Jacksonville. This committee, it focuses on developing the priorities and legislative and regulatory policy positions that we all look at together as a board. And it also, this committee focuses on the development of a rapid response team, so when issues arise that are affecting our profession in the legislative and the policy front, this is the group that really meets that head on and develops the overview and the positions for it for all of us to review and make some determinations on next steps. And then overseeing the calls to action, so we need to mobilize our membership. This is the committee that really has the boots on the ground to get our membership mobilized to contact legislators and policymakers to have the discussions about the issues as they arise. So in serving on this committee, you are also a liaison to our state government network, and we coordinate with other state entities around the country on looking at initiatives and commonalities of legislative issues so that we have a good perspective on issues that are affecting our profession, not just within our state, but around the country as well. And this group also each year looks at progress that's been made and where support has come from within the legislature. And we select the Legislator of the Year awards through this body. They review different candidates and bring recommendations forward. And we also have a technical advisory committee regarding codes and standards, and you'll hear that referred to as CSTAC as we go forward. And the Codes and Standards Technical Advisory Committee specifically is a group that deals with particular issues relative to building codes and standards statewide, so that as changes are being discussed relative to the codes, this Technical Advisory Committee helps us to formulate our position overall in support or an effective change in codes and standards. And Vicki mentioned earlier we have our Florida Architects Political Action Committee. The advocacy group works very closely with FAPAC in terms of developing areas of focus as well as organizing fundraising initiatives to support different candidates around the state, particularly during election time, and building our coffers and our war chest through our support where we feel like it can be most effective in terms of our profession. This group also works with a task force that we have, which is a joint task force of AIA Florida and the building officials of Florida, or you'll hear them referred to as BOAF as we go through the year. But our advocacy group works with that task force as well, developing collaborative initiatives with building officials so that we work together jointly on issues. So that's a quick overview of the advocacy committee. And we also wanted to highlight our communications committee. Vicki mentioned this is a committee we think, going forward, we see a lot of activity, a lot of focus for this committee. It's going to be headed up by Joyce Owens, our vice president. She's from the Southwest Florida chapter, and Joyce brings a very good, well-rounded perspective, particularly in the area of communications, and she's worked closely with our Florida Foundation for Architecture as well, and has done a lot in her region on publications, publicity, and working closely with the media to advance the understanding and awareness of the profession. And so she's very passionate about this particular area. And in the coming year, we're really going to be focusing quite a bit on aligning and bringing more consistency to our communications outlets. And we're going to be looking at really introducing some pretty major changes to our Florida Caribbean Architect magazine structure. We're going to be really focusing on developing digital content for that, as well as looking at aligning our own website with upcoming changes that are going to be coming up through national, and looking at a greater level of consistency in our web presence. So along with that, Joyce is very focused on expanding our social media use and publicizing our advocacy efforts. And you'll see that all of these committees are going to be getting an overview on here are interrelated. So the initiatives in one committee oftentimes have kind of cross-pollination results to the other committees. So especially where communications is concerned, publicizing and expanding awareness of the different efforts of all the committees is very important. And we also have a task force that will be ongoing through 2014 for women in architecture, and that's a task force that began this year, and we're looking to continue its efforts through the Communications Committee, and that's one in particular I think that will touch all of the other committees as well. We also have our membership committee, and this will be headed up by J.J. Scott, and J.J. is a vice president from Tallahassee, and he will be leading the membership committee, and this committee is going to be very involved with both our recruitment and our retention efforts for membership, as well as our expansion efforts related to allied membership. We've been discussing as a board and as an executive committee opportunities that may be out there for specialization in different areas as it relates to membership categories and the focus areas of our members. We also have developed a very strong connection with the AIAS components around the state, with NCARB as well, and we have in place an IDP coordinator network throughout the state. And those elements all are under the charge of the membership committee. There's a lot of different initiatives related to young architects, emerging professionals, and students that fall under that. And we've also developed a task force focused on citizen architect, and that task force did quite a lot over the course of this year to advance the citizen architect program, and we see the first wave of our recognized citizen architects coming out here and being recognized in our upcoming year. So that work will continue, and that will also fall under the membership committee. We also have our professional development committee, sometimes referred to as the knowledge committee. This will be headed by our vice president, Joe Garcia, and Joe is from Gainesville. This committee will be working on both the quality of our continuing education as well as its competitiveness. We have been speaking as a board quite a lot over the years, the recent years, about different sources of continuing education and the competition that's in that market right now, and where we fit within that, and what we can do to separate ourselves in terms of the quality and the content of our continuing education opportunities that we provide for our members. And so this committee is very involved in developing that and really positioning us better within the market to be very competitive. We also have a safety assessment program that's ongoing. That is a program that trains architects for post-disaster assessment of structures. So looking at areas that are damaged by natural disaster, going in as a team to evaluate and assess and work with local authorities to help get things back up and running as quickly as possible. So that program will be ongoing and under the Professional Development Committee. And we also, within this realm, have been dealing with the specialized certification I mentioned earlier as well. But this is a committee that will be looking at different areas where certifications may be relevant concerning our membership and developing better definition for what those types of programs may be, and bringing that forward to the board for discussion as to whether or not they want to pursue that initiative for the future. This committee also works very closely with participation with faculty and with university. Vicki mentioned earlier we have standing invitations as ex officio members on the board for the deans of the universities. We also do coordinate with universities and with faculty on different initiatives for professional development. We have a Fellows Committee as well that falls under this committee's charge. The Fellows Committee is really focused on encouraging and expanding the efforts of our members to pursue fellowship within the association. When we look at where we stand relative to our peer states out there, the large states, we feel that we can do a lot better in elevating our members to fellowship status, and this committee is charged with focusing specifically on that so that we can expand our presence within the College of Fellows as a state. And this committee also is working very closely with the Convention Planning Committee each year, developing the continuing education and the speaker arrangements for keynotes and general sessions for the annual convention. And we've also begun, we're in the very early stages of developing a Leadership Institute for AIA Florida. This program, this initiative will fall under the Professional Development Committee as well. And the Leadership Institute really is going to be focused on providing a program opportunity for members who are looking to take the next steps in their career, not just beyond licensure, but towards community leadership within practices, and at the policy level as well. So this will be a program that really gives us some different opportunities to focus on providing continuing education and knowledge regarding much larger issues and where they influence and impact the profession, and encouraging our members to become more engaged and more involved in leadership roles in whatever capacity it may be, at the community level or the practice level or the individual level. So it's a new initiative that we are starting off on, and will fall under this committee. So that rounds out the committees. You'll find out more, I guess, about those once we get into the year, and particularly about the task forces I mentioned as well. Some of you may be interested in coming on board with those. So the committee survey will be arriving in about an hour with questions asking you to rank your committee preferences. So take a look at all 4 of those areas and give us your preferences in that survey. It just takes a minute to fill out. It's a very quick and easy questionnaire. So we will know where your interests lie heading into the new year, and we can go ahead and align those. And when we meet in January, we will hit the ground running and already know where everyone is going to be working and where your interests are. And we will announce those assignments, as we said, as soon as we meet in January. So with that, I'd like to, any questions you have, please feel free to enter those in at this time. And we gave the dates out already, but we'll just want to remind everyone that January 14th is our legislative day in Tallahassee, so we will be visiting our legislators, and I hope you're all coordinating with your component leadership, and for those of you who are on staff components according with your staff to get appointments set. If unstaffed, then working within your volunteer leadership and coordinating with our staff in Tallahassee to get your appointments ready for Legislative Day. And January 15th will be the full board meeting in Tallahassee as well. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone there, and I will be happy to take any questions.
Nathan, so far we haven't gotten anything typed in. So, unless somebody's typing right now. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay, well, feel free to email us or pick up the phone and give us a call if something does come to mind. Look for that survey in about an hour and fill it out right away, and have a great Christmas.
Hang on, we got a question.
Oh, good.
Nope, it's a thank you.
It's a thank you. Thank you, guys.
Oh. All right, well, yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great Christmas holiday, and have a great New Year. And we're looking forward to seeing you all in January, and looking forward to a great and a productive year together.
Thank you.